Speaker.
I call Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the enjoyable things about a bill's first reading is that come the day that the bill is introduced and into this Parliament and we're required to stand up and make a contribution to it, it means that suddenly we have to turn our attention to something that we might know absolutely nothing about, apart from going to the dentist in this case, where I get irradiated once a year. And I'm very lucky to be irradiated once a year. Well, to only be irradiated in my teeth, I think is what I'm trying to say. But what is interesting is, with the first reading, is that we haven't yet had the benefit of advice from officials. We haven't yet had the benefit of contributions from industry experts, anybody who cares to come and speak to us about bills such as the Radiation Safety Bill. So I've been listening with my notes today, and I've had a look at the bill, and we will be looking in the Select Committee process into this bill with a great deal more depth. But I have been listening this evening, and there were a couple of contributions which have genuinely puzzled me, and there is a point that a couple of speakers have made this evening. One is the Green member and one is the previous Speaker of New Zealand First, and they made quite a strong point around non-iodising radiation, which I only ionising, there you go, 2 seconds later and she has the words right, which I hadn't realised until just now was different from the radiation which is used for industrial, medical, agricultural purposes. So that's news, and it's news to me. But the point that those 2 speakers both made about non-ionising radiation, which is devices such as cell towers, power lines, microwaves, etc., and as the Green member helpfully pointed out, really indicated a level of radiation being emitted. Yep. They both lamented the fact that these devices, and for the purposes of the point I'm trying to make, I'll talk about microwaves, lamented the fact that microwaves and power lines and their ilk were not included in the bill. And it seemed to be their strong contention to the House that, well, maybe these non-ionising devices such as microwaves should be included in the bill. So I listened carefully, as one does in this House, to one's colleagues across the House, particularly when they are supporting the bill, which I think is very helpful. And it made me wonder about several things. First of all, does that mean that they are unregulated? And the answer to that is no, because they are variously regulated by other pieces of legislation, health and safety, environmental legislation, consumer legislation, and if you're thinking about microwave ovens, then I think consumer legislation comes very much to the fore. So I'm thinking about the fact that those non-ionising devices are regulated under their own Acts of Parliament, which brought me to the next point that they were making, which was contending that those devices, such as our microwave, should be brought into this bill. So then I started thinking, well, what would the impact of that be? And so I then turned to the main provisions in the bill, and I thought, okay, well, let's run through, for the purposes of extending their argument and testing it, what would happen if the microwave were brought in to this radiation safety bill amendment. So then I have a look at the main provision. So I've got a microwave at home, as indeed most of us have. So, Mr. Speaker, if the microwave and its ilk were brought into this bill, it would ensure that every person who deals with a radiation source, microwave, must ensure that people in the environment are protected now and in the future from the adverse effects of the radiation source. Good so far. Don't have a problem with that. Got to keep the kids away from the microwave. Make sure it's used properly. Don't put metal in it. I can live with that, that's okay. So then we move on to the next provision, which says the bill establishes that a person who deals with a radiation source, microwave, for the purposes of my exposition, must ensure that the expected benefits to people and society of dealing with the radiation source outweigh the risk of harm to people or society. And to me that seems a little heavy-handed when one is talking about a microwave. Just saying. So then I move on to the next provision in this bill, which says that the bill must ensure that the magnitude of individual doses of ionising radiation, I'm thinking, do you put the thing on for a minute? Do you put the thing on for 30 seconds? How much does it take to defrost a packet of mints? So if we bring that into this legislation, are we then going to be requiring people to have and I read it also in the bill, a licence? So is the opposition, in fact, contending, well, you know, that's the argument, they're saying no now, but that's the argument that the opposition were promoting, is that the non-ionising radiation devices such as microwaves and power lines should be brought into the auspices of this bill. So are they arguing that we need more regulation in New Zealand, and that those people, me in my kitchen when I'm defrosting my packet of mints, should be a licensed user of regulation? So look, what I think I'm trying to say to the House, Mr. Speaker, is we're in the first reading of this bill. We've got a long way to go in the Select Committee process, but I think we've got to be just a little bit careful when we read our debate notes and we have a look at the bill on the table there, that we perhaps don't jump to conclusions which might indeed be disproved as we go through the Select Committee process. Because the last thing that I want to see, in this bill or any bill is to add more regulation that is unnecessary. So I believe that it is unnecessary to bring non-ionising devices into this bill, because to do so, first of all, would require the users, and so that's you and me and all of us in this House, to then become registered users and have a licence, which then needs to get renewed every 12 months or whatever regime. No, we're not going to do it. It's nonsense. And the other salient point, which I don't know why the members of the opposition missed it, because it was there in black and white in my notes, and seemed to be obvious that the microwave in particular is regulated by its own pieces of legislation. Consumer Protection Act, we have various acts of Parliament which keep us safe from those devices. So, Mr. Speaker, that is the first point I want to make. The second point that I would like to make about this bill is the one that many of the members of this House have also made, and that is that, and we talked about the Beatles. Somewhere in here we had a conversation about the Beatles, and I think what that was speaking to was we've had radiating devices around since around about the 60s or even the 50s. And so times have changed. This bill has had its day. The use of radiating devices is now right through the worlds of medicine, and thank goodness it is. And we've had a rather uncomfortable exposition by the chairman of the committee, who tried to tell us the use of radiation in treating prostate cancer. We'll leave that one right there, thank you very much. And least said in the committee the better, because some of us are quite delicate in that way. But radiation has got uses, seriously, for all of those of us whose family members have been touched by illness and cancer, and we just thank God for it under those circumstances. It also has uses in agriculture. It has uses in science and space exploration, where I was further doing my homework this evening. So what this bill does is brings up to date the regulation around irradiating devices. I do look forward to it's patted through the Select Committee, and I do wait for our submissions to tell me whether I'm in fact wrong wrong when I contend that there is no need for non-ionising devices to be brought into this bill because they're adequately covered in other legislation. Mr Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak.